Good Friday morning, folks. This is the Thrifty Gamer 83 bringing you a look at what truthfully destroyed the Dreamcast, in my opinion. Yes. This right here was one of the greatest video game consoles of all time. Sadly, the sales numbers don't reflect that. It was the first 128-bit console. But let's look at what really killed the Dreamcast. Was it Sega flooding the market? No, not really. What really killed the Dreamcast, in my opinion, was the revered figure of Bernie Stolar. And people treat him with reverence, or they revile him. For me, I revile Bernie because while, yes, he was great at marketing, he was great at bringing technological steps such as the online modem, but where he really failed, where Sega really failed at, is entrusting Bernie to completely run and oversee marketing. That was perhaps one of the biggest failures of all time in any video game industry, was allowing Bernie Stolar just to have yay-nay voting privileges over what got imported and what got ported to the console. Consequently, he did not really see the need for role-playing games. And as we know, I did review Kingdom Hearts for this bad boy right here, the PlayStation 2. Yes, this is called the killer of the Dreamcast. Is it a killer? Not really. No. As a matter of fact, if you want to see a good demonstration, this is what a Dreamcast should rest upon. What really killed the Dreamcast, what really brought about Sega's anticlimactic end as a console developer was just plain outright ignorance. Stolar completely refused and at times used his ego to guide Sega right straight into the ground. This is a man who pretty much fell right in love with how Atari did marketing during the video game crash. And we know how that ended. An oversaturation of titles. Does this sound familiar, folks? Does it? Yes, you can thank Bernie for that. You can thank Bernard Stolar for outright killing Sega as a console maker and manufacturer. In the end, Sega CEO had to basically pay out of pocket to keep Sega going, to keep the innovative video gaming streak going. And yes, we blame Sega for oversaturation with the Sega CD and with the Sega 32X. But really, who sat on board Sega's American division at that time and just allowed it to happen? If you fail at Atari through oversaturation and you fail at Sega through oversaturation of consoles and of arcade ports, then you are to blame. Nobody says that about Stolar. Nobody says he is to blame. Nobody says, well, you know, he's led two companies straight into the ground just through oversaturation. And that's a soft sell. It's a short-term sell. It's something which destroys companies. And it destroyed Sega. And people will still interview him just to hear the greatness of his words let's be honest. Would you trust this man? Would you trust this man to run your company? No! Nobody should trust Bernard Stolar. No one! This is just... It was a short-term gimmick. It didn't work out. Sadly, it cost Sega. And yes, I think I have a right to be just a little bit angry about how he is featured and revered and in reverence. But all being equal, he was a terrible businessman. He is a terrible businessman. You don't win by oversaturation and soft sells just because you don't like a product like role-playing games. If they're selling you, get in. You keep it going. That's really where Bernie fell flat on his face, was the soft sells, the soft pitches. And it just boggles the mind on why people continually praise him. The man failed at Sega. He failed at Atari. Can we get it done with? Can we just say he failed? That's really why this little console right here failed. He brought nothing new to the table. He brought no groundbreaking deals. He brought no groundbreaking contractual obligation for third parties. He left nothing on the table. What he left Sega with was a bitter taste in its mouth in sales of intellectual property rights just to stay afloat. I love the Sega Dreamcast. I really do. Stolar is a marketing genius, but in overseeing a company, he's just not that good. And you have to look beyond the PlayStation 2 killing the Sega Dreamcast and admit that soft sell salesmanship doesn't work when it doesn't pay attention to what the consumers want. And oversaturation flooding the market again. That took Sega down a peg because Sony had the Final Fantasy series. And even now, with intellectual properties from third parties, it's pretty hard to understand how he stayed on board of Sega, how he is a reverential figure in video gaming history. I think the bottom line is he should be nowhere as reverential a figure as he is right now. He doomed Sega to being a third-party intellectual property. You can say what you want about the easy privacy of games, you can say anything, but largely what you're doing is just making sure that Bernie has his rear end covered. And that is something which, as an honest, hard sell salesman, bear in mind I did work in retail and I still consider myself a hard sell salesman, shattering a lot of sales records on the floor. Bernie just doesn't have it. He can't hack it. He can market, but he can't sell. His neglect of what the customers wanted for ports, for imports, for gaming, ultimately, tragically, led to a lot of gamers jumping ship on Sega and blaming Sega for oversaturation when Bernie should have said, well, we shouldn't really try the Sega CD, we shouldn't try the 32X, we should wait until we have the Dreamcast instead of flooding the market. Instead, he fell back on the old Atari. And that ultimately stung. He didn't have a leg to stand on, but he just continued to watch the failures mount. And I think it's one of those situations where you take the paycheck and run. You see this? It's something I will never get rid of. You see this? This did not kill this. Oversaturation of the market and poor American salesmanship killed the Sega Dreamcast. There's no other explanations for it. You can say, well, it was Sega having lack of security. You can say that. But back in early '99, who really had the technology? You'd have to do overburning, overbuffering, overburn protections to crack it. And not many knew how to do that. So now you can say whatever you want to cover the rear end of Bernard Stolar. It doesn't work anymore. Soft salesmanship never worked. Oversaturation never worked. You innovate, you create, you draw out the business schematic, and you find parallels to what you are trying to achieve. I think sometimes that's the difference between guys like me who love being on a sales floor and love selling, and someone like Bernie, great as a creative marketing genius, poor as a salesman, because he thinks of the short-term goals. And that's what happened to the Dreamcast, folks. That's what happened to it. Rant, rave, love, hate. Just click that subscribe button, folks. I look forward to seeing you more and more. I will be doing a video compilation on Monday, and it will be detailing how I truthfully feel, again, about what the Dreamcast had accomplished. Alright, folks. You know what to do. Have a good one. See you next week.